So if somebody is in the audience watching this and listening, wondering how do we get started? How do I get started in yoga? Are there specific yoga for Parkinson's classes? Are there online classes? Is there so many types of yoga? Where do I start?
Yes, I mean, I think that there's a whole host of different types of yoga, and there's probably as many names of different types of yoga as there are sometimes the practitioners doing it, right? So everyone has their own little novel approach. I think to make this accessible and for anyone out there who really wants to get benefit, I think we have to get away from sort of the complexity of, is it this type, is it that type, and what exactly have we studied, and how many poses, and how many minutes and things like that. Just to sort of take a step back from yoga in general and think about the mind-body approaches in general. There are things that people are possibly doing in some of these spaces to get some of the benefits of mind-body approaches, which I told you can affect mood and things like that, can affect sleep, can affect cognition, perhaps even in things like prayer, things like getting out in nature, things like, getting together and even dancing, getting into flow states where you're enjoying something, live music, certain things. So I think, to make it less complex for people and who are really feeling like overwhelmed, like, today I tuned in and there's 10 different types of exercise and people are telling me to do all these things and it gets overwhelming. Sometimes just making that baby step and adding a little bit of something. So if it might be that you can, try some of the meditative aspects by getting out into your backyard and maybe feeling your feet on the ground in the grass, and sort of that feeling of grounding with your feet on the grass, sitting in a chair, in a stable chair. That's something, looking up into the sunshine, looking at the sky, sort of letting the sort of natural elements sort of wash over you. That is actually meditative as well. And we sometimes make these things so complex that patients feel like I can't, I don't have a studio, I don't have a computer, there's no way that I'm going to meditate on a mat for 20 minutes. But if it's something where you get together, perhaps with your church group once a week, and you sing in a choir and you're breathing in this group and you're sort of in this state of connection with other people and sort of calming your mind just by being in this place, disconnecting from all the other things that we're doing. These things are actually part of the same medicine that we can get from yoga. So I think, that's an entry, perhaps if it's super overwhelming, is just to start with these basic, maybe get out in nature, go to the beach, watch the waves, go to a lake, watch these sort of natural elements. Then we can sort of think about, if there are some hopes to do some poses, depending on your level of, flexibility. It's really important to be safe, right? So we want to be careful. Some types of yoga, for example, Bikram or heated yoga, sometimes those are perhaps not the best for our patients because they can affect blood pressure. And it's a very hot room and it can really drop people's blood pressure. So you want to be mindful of, entering something that's so new and different and perhaps unsafe. So I think, we don't want to be signing up for another type of yoga as vinyasa, which is a flow yoga, where people are, moving from one posture to the other. There's often an aerobic element of it. These are quite, sometimes strenuous classes. And so perhaps we start with, a chair class. And perhaps looking at, there are some Parkinson specific classes depending on where you live in the country. There are even some online classes that started during the pandemic. They went online, and I think they've now transitioned back to sort of in person. And I think that, the beauty of online is that it is accessible. We can have people who may not be able to drive these distances to come into a room and be together in a place. But I think that from my eye, I think it's always in some ways preferable to try to actually see people in a space and be with a person, be able to have somebody, perhaps touch you, adjust you, things like that. There's actually quite a lot of beauty in having a shared space where you're breathing together, where you're moving together, where you have, the teacher who's also feeling the room. So I think if you can find an in-person place to do this, of course, depending on the safety of the pandemic and masking and things like that. Some people have been doing some of these classes outside, but, I think starting in a chair, so you get a sense of some of the movements, depending on your level of mobility, and going from there, There are classes that use modifications. And so if you have a sense of who the teacher is, you can talk to the teacher beforehand and say, I have Parkinson's, I've had it for this long, these are my issues, I have balance issues, would it be better for me to start in a chair or start with standing and get a sense of things, and then sort of slowly work your way up. I think, you never want to get an injury that's going to derail your exercise altogether. So I think safety is of the utmost importance. And actually, chair yoga classes are actually tremendously beneficial in some ways. Sometimes being in the chair can allow you to get sometimes a stretch or sometimes a breathing pattern that you may not be able to access if you were on a mat or standing. So I'd be open-minded to, starting with a chair class and going from there.